People are saying that Deepseek is a Chinese invention. They're wrong. It's an American invention. And we're going to explain why. So, Brother Tahir, let's very quickly recap. Deepseek is this startup from China. Well, it's basically like a side project of the hedge fund. People are already going to be saying, like, you contradicted yourself. I will explain. Just give us a minute, right? So they're the side project of this hedge fund, which is produced through a bunch of technical innovations, a very strong reasoning AI model that can match or exceed the best American models for a fraction of the price, right? And it's not the first time that we've seen China completely surprising everyone amidst the sanctions war, because we had the Huawei chip, right? We had the Huawei chip where they were able to come up with, I think, a 7 nanometer chip, which was actually, way more advanced than anyone thought it could be at that point. So who knows what they've got cooking? Who knows, what BYD and these the car manufacturers are going to have as they start to come into our markets? They're going to be major disruptors.
Yeah.
So any thoughts on that?
I'm looking forward to a cheap electric car, basically, is the answer for that. No, I think that you're absolutely right. It's an American caused problem.
Yeah.
And it's actually more fundamental than just saying, oh, well, America put on sanctions on China. And
because people say it's like necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Yeah. But I think it's beyond that. It's got to do more with the actual fact there's structural issues with the type of economy that the American economy has, that the world economy is based on, which is a debt-based, interest-based fiat currency. It inevitably leads to a major superpower feeding its own competitor till it's bigger than it so that it can eat it.
Yes. It's like a natural law.
It's like a natural law.
Okay, so before we go into that, can you tell us what a reserve currency is and what a fiat currency is and a reserve currency, and then we'll go into this.
So let me see if I get this right, because you're just throwing this all on me. You didn't tell me I was going to be defining things. But basically, a fiat currency is a currency that is backed only by government sovereignty.
Okay.
So what that means is that the government says, right, we're going to use pounds. Pounds have no fundamental meaning anymore. It used to be a pound of gold.
It used to be a weight.
It used to be a weight. It used to have a fundamental meaning. It was a weight of a particular amount of a commodity, typically gold or silver or a combination of the two, right? So now it doesn't have that meaning. A pound is a piece of paper, which definitely doesn't weigh a pound, right?
Yeah.
So, and that is backed, and that is used as a means of currency circulation in society by virtue of the fact that the government demands taxation in that particular currency.
Okay, and how is that fiat currency produced?
So that's money printing. A big printer. Typically, it doesn't happen with a printer anymore because printers are very unrelable. I don't know if you've ever had a printer.
Oh my God!
You always have to fix them.
The global economy could be disrupted by the inkjet not working.
Exactly. Imagine you need to replace the ink and
my Wi-Fi isn't connecting. Print.
Bluetooth.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not done like that anymore.
Right.
Typically, it's done by effectively just allocating numbers digitally into the bank accounts of the of the central bank, typically into commercial bank accounts with the central bank, so that they have increased liquidity to be able to settle their payments between each other and therefore make increasing payments to their
And when
consumers.
you make a loan, they just basically create that money.
Yeah, you go to the mortgage, they don't give you any grandma's money. They literally make up. This is sickening, actually. You go for a £400,000 house, they literally type in 400,000 into their little computer.
Yeah.
They say, here you go, then they allocate it to you, and then they put an interest payment on that, which means you'll end up paying 700,000 of their made-up money.
Well, it was quite difficult for them to type it in.
Wait for it. Of their made-up money. I heard the joke. It wasn't that great. Of their made-up money.
Denial is in the
You have to go out and find that extra 300,000 beyond the 400,000 to give back to them. And within the first year of them generating that money, they've already sold that debt on to multiple parties. So typically within the first year or two of a mortgage loan, they've already made their money.
Wow. Really?
Yes, they've already made their money on you.
I didn't know
that. In the lifetime of a mortgage, that bank will actually make the equivalent amount of your debt multiple times over.
It's almost like the banks aren't the good guys.
And then they still go after you if you don't make the payment on made-up funny money that they've already recouped multiple times over. Can you imagine a more sickening system, more weighted against the ordinary person?
No.
No, I can't. I literally can't imagine it. Maybe I should ask Perplexity.
No, don't.
No, okay, fine.
So we have a whole episode on that with Tariq Al-Dawani. So that is a fiat currency.
Correct.
And a reserve currency is basically when...
oh, yeah, I didn't answer the second part of the question.
That's okay.
No, you do it.
No, please.
No, please.
No, you go first.
Okay, so a reserve currency is... You didn't know the answer to it. That's what you're pointing off to me.
It's a currency.
The reserve currency is the currency that is used by internationally to settle international payments, typically And the way that it's basically the US dollar has become the reserve currency, people say it's for all variety of reasons. It's a mix of reasons. The most fundamental thing people always point to is the fact that oil was typically from the Middle East sold in the petrodollar, which just means the dollar.
Yeah.
And therefore, because everybody needs oil for the functioning of their society, they all had to obtain dollars from the US.
Okay.
And they did that by selling their goods to the United States in exchange for dollars.
Yeah.
And when they got the dollars, they can then go to the Middle East and pay for it in dollars to get oil.
So basically, to get oil, you need to have dollars, and
so
you get dollars from America and from selling things to America.
Yeah, and this is the funny thing, you know. But Donald Trump, this is so funny because he's come into power, and also previous presidents have talked like this as well, as if the U.S. economy is in actual fact, actually, as if the world economy is dependent upon the US economy.
Yes.
In reality, it's not the US economy feeding the world economy. It's actually the world economy feeding the US economy.
Because that's what give it products so that they can get dollars.
Yeah.
Because America has military and geopolitical control over the major oil centers.
Yeah, I mean, it's also been able to sustain its reserve status by virtue of the fact that it was a huge manufacturing base to be able to sell things for dollars.
Yeah.
It has a huge market for people to sell things to it.
Yeah.
Right. So it has a huge population. It's, it's a continent practically. So there is that. And then it also is able to, it was also a major manufacturing hub, the manufacturing hub of the 20th century. Right?
Yeah.
So
it took it away from Britain.
So, that all plays a part in it. And that's what sustained its ability to function as the reserve currency.
Yeah.
But before the dollar, there was a pound, which was the reserve currency. And before the pound, I can't remember, maybe it was the franc. Or the Deutschmark. I know it wouldn't have been the Deutschmark. Probably may have been the franc, but I know at some point down the road it was, the Dutch currency and and the lily roses or whatever.
Well, I don't know if there was such a degree of total.
There wasn't a degree of total domination. I don't think.
Yeah, as the dollar has been, and what we're going to outline here is how actually America has caused its own demise and is causing its own demise
actively,
almost as like a matter of natural law.
Yeah.
So now, shall I run through the steps?
Yeah, you go for it.
Okay.
You go crazy.
Okay, so I will try not to go crazy, but I will try and explain it in a sane and coherent manner. So here it is. So basically, we have a fiat currency.
Yep.
And the US is the reserve currency of the world. Okay, and that means that America has an extremely strong currency and economy because everyone has to sell it things and it has control over oil as well as its geopolitical status. But fundamentally, it's because of the dollar. Everyone needs the dollar, right? Now, if everyone needs the dollar, it means that the value of the dollar is much higher than the value of other currencies, okay?
In real terms.
In real terms, right? Now, what do I pay American laborers with? Dollars, yeah?
Yeah.
And what do I pay, let's say, Chinese laborers with? Not dollars, yuan or renminbi, I can't remember the name of it.
Renminbi, yeah.
Yeah, you pay them with the Chinese currency.
Yeah.
So you have an American economy, which is necessarily very strong because it's the reserve economy. And then you have all the other economies with all their other relatively poor currencies, okay? Now, if I'm a producer, I'm a manufacturer, I've got a company, if I'm American or not American, but let's just say I'm American, I could produce my goods in America, okay? Has some advantages, people speak the same language, there's a decent knowledge base there, but at the same time, as well as shipping costs, etc. But actually, pretty expensive to pay people in American dollars.
Yeah,
because if I look globally, I could go to China and I could pay laborers there who will produce over time the same goods with a way cheaper currency. I can pay them in something which is a fraction of dollars.
Your profit is much bigger.
So your profit, but then you go back, you sell it for American dollars, So your profit is way bigger, okay? And that's, again, this is inevitable, okay?
It's a necessary feature of having a reserve currency status.
It's a necessary feature of having a reserve currency, which is that your labor costs are much higher than everyone else in the world. So then what's going to happen? You're going to have a few countries in particular that are going to have particular willingness or readiness, or whatever it is, to absorb those manufacturing needs. So they are going to be the ones who are putting in the labor, who are doing the manufacturing. Now, you need to have some degree of knowledge transfer to sustain that, because you have to have your manufacturers doing it in the right way. So they have to be taught the right processes. And inevitably, they get skilled up.
Yeah.
So you're paying them on the cheap so that you can get your profits now, but actually there's a knowledge transfer that's happening to these people, right? And what's happening to your own laborers? Okay. What would happen to the manufacturing base in your own country? It's gonna shut down because you're gonna be losing money to the manufacturers in abroad, let's say China, because that's actually how it has played out. So your own manufacturing base is going to decline because it's going to be outcompeted by the country which has a weaker currency. Okay, what's that going to cause? That's going to cause your essentially cost of living crisis. People are going to have less money because money is going to go away from the ordinary people who put the labor in. The manufacturing base is going to disappear. You're going to have the emergence of pure knowledge economies or whatever, or service economies. Okay? But manufacturing is fundamental.
Yeah, it is.
You need to have an actual manufacturing base.
Yeah, that's right.
And that will be depleted in the countries with the reserve currency, but also in any of the countries with stronger currencies. It's almost like the stronger your currency, the more your manufacturing base will be depleted, which is exactly what's happened.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and that's what's happened with respect to China. So you have a knowledge transfer happening. And when you have that knowledge transfer happening and you have manufacturing coming up in this other place, inevitably they can sell more of their products to you, so they can get more dollars, but they can sell it to the rest of the world. So actually they enrich themselves. And that's what's happened. China has got manufacturing bases there. They've had knowledge transfer, and then they've managed that whole process well and have become, have sold to the rest of the world and have used that money to invest in their infrastructure. There is obviously human agency here.
Yeah.
This isn't a pure natural law.
No.
It has to be managed well.
Yeah.
But they have managed it well. So they have reinvested into their economy and into their people, and they've had a massive reduction in absolute poverty, in relative poverty, and they've been able to harness the gains that they have.
Yeah. And keep them within the country.
Absolutely. Now look at what happens in America, okay? Your manufacturing base is depleted.
Yeah.
People don't have as much money.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens? Populists are elected who say we're going to reverse the situation with tariffs, right? Which means goods are more expensive to import. Okay, goods are more expensive, people get poorer. So then you get into a self-reinforcing cycle in the reserve currency country if it has these political dynamics to which it is at least inclined.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not saying that is totally inevitable, but it's at least inclined. That is what has happened.
Yeah.
Right. And if that happens, then you are seen as a more unstable actor on in the geopolitical scene. So then you will lose some of your geopolitical trust and ability to influence, because if you have other countries that have the knowledge, that have the manufacturing base, and now have the money
and stability,
then why wouldn't you go to them?
Exactly.
Which is what's happened with BRICS.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? So there is this complex dynamic between being the reserve currency and the economic factors here, and basically that country with the reserve currency producing its nemesis, which is what's happened
and
economically.
feeding it to be a monster bigger than it, which can eat it.
Yeah.
It's like a person feeding a big dog to ultimately wreck
There's
its
some
home.
kind of Asian proverb about that.
I think there is. I can't remember what it is either. Of course, it's an Asian proverb.
Yeah, I mean, but it's I don't see how it could happen otherwise fundamentally, because this is what's going to happen in your reserve currency. And it's going to be we're already seeing the decline of the American empire. We're seeing the emergence of BRICS, which is obviously led by China and Russia. Russia has its own kind of cultural power and military power, actually, essentially, as well as being a central resource of commodities. So it has its own capacities. But I think this dynamic is really interesting. And actually, the question is, how could America have avoided this? And what is the solution to this reserve currency trap?
They definitely could have done things to slow it down.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult, I think, if you have the degree of absolute world domination like they had. Funnily enough, the stronger your reserve currency status in the world, and the more you get sold these goods into your society, and the stronger and overinflated your currency strength, the faster this happens.
Yeah. And maybe that's why China has kept trying to keep their currency low, right?
Maybe, but I don't think they want to be a reserve currency.
Goods cheaper.
So what BRICS are trying to do is they're trying to, in actual fact, create this basket of commodities, which should act as so that no one nation is the currency reserve status, which is a very smart move. And that's exactly what the United States could have done, but they benefited so extraordinarily and exorbitantly from having currency reserve status over the short term that I don't think their thinkers, their economists understood this principle when it was actively happening. I mean, in terms of long-term solutions, I think the fundamental long-term solution is a gold commodity.
Or a commodity.
Or a commodity currency. And when we say commodity currency, what we do not mean is a fiat-backed
Yes.
commodity.
Yeah.
Because fiat-backed commodity, in other words, people say a dollar is worth this much gold. Eventually have what Richard Nixon did, which is he faced the difficulty of the Vietnam War and decided to print a whole load of dollars into existence, thus deflating the value of the dollar and just delinking the dollar from gold. And that was the end of so if you have a fiat-based gold-backed or commodity-backed fiat currency, if you have money printing, which inevitably you have with an interest-based system where you have to print 3%, whatever the interest rate is every single year to keep up with the interest payments, then fundamentally you will always be in that trap.
Yeah.
So I think a gold commodity-based currency is probably, or a commodity-based currency is the solution, because what it means is that power is distributed across multiple societies and it forces nations to compete on level terms.
Right. So it doesn't allow the monopolization. Because actually something like gold is distributed around the world.
Yeah.
And more fundamentally, it's not something which you can just print. Like, let's say you don't have gold in your area of your continent or your country. You do have goods and you will have things which you can sell for gold.
Yes.
Right? But what you don't have is one country being able to just print it at will and completely distort market dynamics.
Yes, exactly.
Right? And you know what? I remember, I don't know if you had the same moment, but in 2012, when the Caliph of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community to which we belong, he addressed the EU.
Yeah, he said we should have a... Yeah.
He said the currency of the world should be one, should be united.
In terms of currency, the world should be united. In terms of free business and trade, the world should be united.
And at the time, I think you were as well, we were MMT theorists, and I was like...
How's it going to work?
I accepted on faith, but I mean, as far as I understand, currencies are always created and printed, and that's fine, and we should just print them better.
Yeah, we should print them and spend them into society at the lowest level.
Yeah, but
so that you raise all the tide, all the people in the society, at the same time, which is, if you're working in the current system, that is the best solution.
Well, it's a solution, but there's an MMT trap as well. This is the video of traps for some reason. There's an MMT trap, which I don't think people talk about enough, which is that... if you have spending like the MMT theorists want, here's what they say. They say, like, let's spend on the people. Yeah. Like at the moment, we have banks which produce loans and they give that to the richest in society.
Yeah.
So they get an unfair advantage. They're able to have the power of patronage.
Yeah.
And they decide where society goes.
And they distort political theatre as well.
Absolutely. So they say, why don't we spend on infrastructure? Why don't we spend on the little guy? And through things like universal basic income, where everyone has £3,000, let's say, a month, right? Yeah. Put right into their account, and they will be able to live on that, and work will become optional, and things will be fine. Because they say we're printing money anyway. Why don't we just print money and give it to the ordinary person? And it's to me and you, I think with you as well, we found it a pretty attractive idea, and we thought it was correct.
I never thought it was attractive.
Really?
I don't think universal basic income is...
Oh, no, not that, but MMT, other MMT theories, yeah?
But that's universal basic income and MMT are two separate things.
No, but UBI is a practical application of MMT. And in fact, is the one which most directly does what they say.
Yeah.
Okay? It'd say, well, why don't you just give it to the consumer then? Why don't you give it straight to a person?
Yeah.
Okay? Let them spend. It doesn't work because of inflation. And MMT theorists will groan at this. But actually, MMT only works if it's done in a limited way to a certain section of the population. Why? Because if you choose to do MMT in, I don't know, Harrow, I don't think Harrow needs it, but let's say we give it to Harrow. That's part of it, mate.
Helicopter drop on Harrow.
Yeah, let's say you just give it to Harrow, yeah? So everyone there gets let's say we give a basic income to the Harrow residents. Then they will have money, but they will have the prices that everyone else experiences.
Yeah.
Because prices will generally be set sort of nationally, right? Apart from maybe your local grocers. Yeah. They'll be broadly set nationally. They won't be able to adjust for Harrow being randomly even more rich. Yeah. Right? In this current moment. Yeah. So they will have they will be able to buy things cheaper. So they will have the advantage. Yeah. If you apply that kind of policy nationally, then everything will readjust. That increase in money in people's accounts will be adjusted for, because every producer will know that people have more money to spend. And
by a specific amount.
By a specific amount, yeah.
So everything will go up by the same ratio.
Yeah. So everything will go up.
It'll take time, and during that period of time, people will enjoy it.
Yeah.
But at some point, it will just have adjusted.
Absolutely. And it's an inevitable adjustment the more broadly it's applied. So MMT only works really as if it's done locally and in a specific time at a specific place. That's when it'll have its most impact. But that's just directing wealth in a certain way. It's not something which can be taken as a general principle.
Yeah.
So inflation will neuter MMT if it's done on the national scale that the MMT theorist suggests. Now, so that's where we were with MMT. That's where I was, at least, with MMT. And Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, the Caliph, he said your currency should be unified. And while we're not saying that gold is the only commodity currency that can be used, it is referred to, gold and silver are referred to in the Quran as wealth,
Yes.
right? As sources of wealth.
As the means of as the fundamental currencies.
Yeah, and the Islamic Empire used them for hundreds of years.
Without devaluing its currency.
Without devaluing, yeah.
Yeah.
What was that book that we read? Murray Rothbard's...
Yeah. How government something against your money.
Yeah, something negative about governments. We'll put it on the screen.
Yeah.
He talks about how in the Islamic Empire they found coins from very early on and coins from hundreds of years later.
And the same gold value.
Same gold value. Like actually they hadn't been, counterfeited and
Yeah, they would smelt them and then recombine them with worse metals like copper and stuff.
Well, others did. But in the Islamic Empire they kept a good degree of continuity.
Because you didn't have interest.
Right.
Because
what's the link there?
Because with interest, you have to, if you have 2% interest, that means next year you have to have an increase in the money supply of 2% to be able to pay the previous year's interest payments, or the interest payment on previous year's debt.
Yeah.
So the interest payment sets the lower threshold of your money printing.
The interest payment sets the lowest
It
threshold.
forces you into money printing.
Yeah, this is what Tariq al-Dawani said.
Yeah, it forces you into money printing at a minimum, at the base rate.
Because you have a certain amount of interest that you need to
pay you don't have
off.
enough money to pay off your debts for the next year. So as a result, if you don't have an interest-based system, in other words, if money does not enter into circulation as debt, bearing interest, then the consequence is that you have no fundamental reason to print money beyond the natural causes, which should be population increase or increase in goods production, for example, which would ultimately lead to deflation if you didn't print money. But in a commodity-based system, if you printed more goods, then you would...
Print more goods? What do you mean?
Sorry, if you produce more goods or if you have a population increase, which should result in an increase in good production, then you would simply export those and you'd have inflow of gold. And so you'd have increased currency within your society naturally by virtue of your increased production.
And you can't have interest in that society, really, because you can't guarantee that next year you will have 2 or 3% of further gold production to meet that demand.
Yeah.
So it completely prohibits it.
Yeah.
So this is one way of implementing a universal currency system, is actually to make it a commodity currency.
And absolutely right. And the problem, I think, for example, with EU systems, for example, with the EU, is they print the euro in a specific country. And they from Brussels, is a centralized printing pot. The thing about gold is it's universally distributed. Yes, it's distributed not completely evenly, but the point is it's available from a wide variety of sources.
Right.
And it's not just gold, it's also silver.
Yes.
Or it could even be other commodities that you tag in terms of its relationship to gold and silver, which is what silver typically did.
Yes.
Right. So
bimetallic system
worked very nicely because one would produce a national currency, the other would produce an international trade currency. Right. So it's just like it's almost like God designed it to be a perfect currency-based system. Yeah. For both international and national trade. Yeah, and you wouldn't have this problem. Exactly. You wouldn't have the problem of the reserve currency because you'd all have the same currency. You'd be on a level playing field, and you wouldn't have the imbalance created by the fact that everybody has to purchase your currency and therefore sell to your country. Yeah. So your success doesn't lead to your failure. Your success, if you manage it correctly, will lead to continued success. Yeah, and you get price stability, and with price stability and predictability of your next year's economic forecasts, it also means that you can have national planning. At the moment we can't have very effective national planning because nobody knows what the economy is going to do next year. Yeah, how are you going to do a HS2 with how much billions? Because there's not political stability in this country anymore either, frankly. Yeah. We've got new prime ministers like, chicken poop gets out eggs. But, but at the same time, we don't have any long-term ability to plan economically. And that's one of the things that actually the political system of the Chinese has enabled them to do. Yeah. The Communist Party has taken a stranglehold on the political system, but it's enabled for them to do long-term economic planning.
Yes, yeah. And there's another issue here, just a final issue I think we should finish on, which is that abundance doesn't always produce growth. And actually, this has been proved in a microcosm with this, which is that OpenAI, with their 500 billion Stargate project, which is a sort of a wormhole project to go into to fight intergalactic.
No, sorry, that was
sorry.
Oh no,
this is a wrong joke. So their Stargate project was 500 billion in infrastructure investment, and their models are trained in quite an expensive way because, rather, that is an example of how capital can actually reduce innovation. Okay, because they had such available capital, all the capital was flowing towards them. And in America, they have such a large amount of money there, right? So there wasn't a need to actually scale down. In fact, if anything, if you had to train in a more expensive way, it makes everyone richer.
In fact, this isn't just...
Whereas the Chinese have the opposite. Because of their constraints, they actually had to innovate.
Yeah, this is actually a bigger problem, and it feeds into something completely separate, which is the IDF.
Right.
The Israeli Defense Force.
We just had to get them in.
We just had to get them in somehow, So they get, bags of money from the United States every single year.
Mm-hmm.
And the consequence is that they are profligate with their wastage of weaponry, in the sense that they will be happy to bomb and bomb and bomb and bomb because they know they're going to get another shipment of bombs. So there's, even for there, there's no moral constraint anyway. Yeah. But even for nations where there might not be a moral constraint, they will still have an economic constraint.
Yeah.
Israel doesn't have an economic constraint, and it doesn't have a moral constraint because it's been an apartheid state for decades. Yeah. And subsequent to that, it's eroded the moral sense of the people in many respects.
And even with respect to America and the major powers, if you don't have money printing, you're not going to have hyperinflated defense budgets where they're just going to have to find a way to spend. And if you have a massive army, well, then you're going to try and find wars. So actually, this problem of money printing infects the whole of society.
Yeah.
And if you have a commodity currency which you can't print because you have to extract, you have to submit to God's system that actually there are real resources and we make things out of those resources. We have to get those resources, and we're not going to let time create money, which is what interest is. Then actually you'll have peace. And in fact, those are the two meanings of Islam, aren't they?
I feel like
peace and submission.
I feel like we haven't explained anything, and we've just used high-level code to talk.
Okay.
If you want to understand some of the terms that we've used in this interview, go to our interview with Tariq El-Dawani on economics. It's probably, I think, the best interview we ever did.
Yes.
And humbly say, probably one of the best interviews on economics on the internet anyway.
Yeah, not really because of us, because of him.
Yeah, we're asking the questions. He was a phenomenal interviewee.
Yeah. So go watch that. And that may clarify things in this video, which
absolutely.
But I'm more optimistic. I think some people understood some things. That's why I tell myself before I sleep. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and peace be upon you.